Hey guys, and welcome to the Working Money Channel. Now I wanted to bring up this tweet from Rand Nooner, that's at CryptoManRand on Twitter from yesterday. As you know, Rand Nooner has a show on CNBC regarding cryptocurrencies, and in this tweet he says, flashback. This time 2 years ago, we entered a bull market unlike any we have ever seen. We watched our phones every minute as prices moved rampantly. Amateurs raised millions in seconds as newbies fought for allocations and ICOs. They had never heard of making 5 times, 10 times, 100 times returns. And so for those of you guys who do not remember the bull run of 2017, that is exactly what he was talking about. Bull run of 2017 from 2 years ago. Okay, this is Bitcoin on the daily, and I'm going to get back to this in a second, but around this time, so like mid to late summer 2017, this is when we really started to see Bitcoin take off. Okay, it had already been increasing in 2016, but then June, okay, here's June, and then August, and then finally October here, we really started to see leaps and bounds, if you guys can kind of gauge that, before the really big leg up in October, November, December 2017. But this was kind of the beginning of the frenzy. This was kind of the beginning of when we were realizing, oh wow, this Bitcoin thing is really taking off, and the FOMO really started to hit. And so for those of you guys a little bit frustrated with the crypto market, seeing Bitcoin languishing at the moment, my question to you is this. Could you wait until August 2020 for BTC to break its high of 20,000 per BTC? Ask yourself that, but then ask yourself, could it happen sooner than that? I personally think we're in a position today where that will happen sooner than mid-2020. To be honest, I have a feeling it could happen in the next few months. But the reason I put that 15-month mark on here is because, guys, if you look back here to the last bull run before the former bull run, so 2 bull runs ago, I wanted to kind of give you guys an idea of once we had started to rally in a bullish momentum. Okay, so Bitcoin was bearish from the end of 2013, all of 2014 until mid-2015, until it started seeing some upward momentum, and we didn't start seeing new highs until November 2015. And it wasn't until February 2017, so 15 months, okay, so retracing up to this level here, it wasn't until February 2017, so that is 15 months later, that we saw Bitcoin break new highs. Now guys, that's 15 months. If you take Bitcoin's newest high after the downturn, it wasn't until May 2019. So 15 months later would bring us to August 2020 in order to reach 20,000. And guys, so the only point I'm trying to make here is that I'm not saying it's going to take 15 months, but even if you gave yourself 15 months, August 2020, for Bitcoin to reach all-time highs, it wouldn't be out of the question. Like I said, I do think it'll happen sooner than that. We did kind of come out of this bearish trend fairly quickly, and we already hit 14,000 back in June, so I think hitting 20,000 is going to happen likely in the next few months. That's just my opinion based on what we're seeing in the crypto space. I saw this from XRP Crypto Wolf on Twitter. That's at XRP Crypto Wolf. Just going to go over this briefly. 25 global central banks, the BIS, and officials from Europe's central bank will meet with Facebook's Libra founders in Switzerland on September 16th to assess financial stability risks of Libra. So again, this happened yesterday, and the countries around the world and central banks, more importantly, central banks around the world are seeing Libra as this potential problem that if they don't address sooner rather than later, it could throw a wrench into all these cryptocurrency regulations that have been tabled, over the last year or two, and could potentially wreak havoc in and amongst the global financial world. When one of the biggest companies worldwide with such a large user base just comes out and says, we have a cryptocurrency and we're going to release it, right? Somewhat arrogantly on top of it all, the world is going to take notice, and governments are going to step in and are kind of forced to be able to solve this problem with solutions that they have brainstormed with other governments around the world and the central banks that are involved in this. So 25 global central banks meeting to address this. Also very importantly, I saw this from XRP Veteran. That's at XRP_veteran on Twitter. We are getting close for XRP, and this has to do with the US Treasury and how the Treasury is seriously considering issuing a 50-year bond next year. This from Stephen Mnuchin. So guys, if you didn't think the economy was in trouble up until now, this is likely your key indicator that it certainly is. So essentially, this article is talking about the U.S. could be issuing a 50-year bond as soon as next year as the government looks for cheaper and longer-term ways to finance its burgeoning debt load. This from Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin. And so if you guys don't know much about investing or bonds, Here's the thing. I'm going to talk a little bit about this article, and I'll link all this in the description. I'm not going to read it all for you, but I'm just going to touch on it. What makes a bond a bond? So a bond, guys, is a loan that the bond purchaser or bond holder makes to the bond issuer. Governments, corporations, and municipalities issue bonds when they need capital. So guys, when governments are in trouble, they issue bonds to essentially borrow money from the people to dig themselves out of financial trouble. An investor who buys a government bond is lending the government money. If an investor buys a corporate bond, the investor is lending the corporation money. Like a loan, a bond pays interest periodically and repays the principal at a stated time known as maturity. So essentially, this is how it works. The longer the time frame of the bond, theoretically, the more financial trouble, well, nobody's telling us this, but the more financial trouble the government or the corporation who is issuing the bond is in. Or at least let me say this, the larger the financial problem is. The long bond is the 30-year, so this was from before, the long bond is the 30-year U.S. Treasury bond, the bond with the most extended maturity issued by the U.S. Treasury. The long bond, like all U.S. Treasury bonds, pays interest semi-annually and is backed by the full might of the U.S. Treasury. As a result, long bonds have a low default risk. So if the government is saying they're going to need 50 years to really kind of manage this debt load, they're making that period longer and longer. It used to be the 30-year U.S. bond, now the 50-year. They're going to borrow your money for 50 years, paying you interest periodically, and then finally paying you the principal upon maturity 50 years down the road. So if you are 20 years old, and a 20-year-old today is very, very unlikely to be buying a bond, you will not be paid back until you are 70. In a lot of these cases, I'm sure that a lot of people buy these bonds and then just will them to their children because they are likely going to be dead by the time the bond comes to maturity, especially in this 50-year bond scenario. But guys, more importantly, what is this signifying? This is signifying that the U.S. economy is in trouble. And they even mentioned it in the CNBC article here. His comments come the day after the president said the U.S. should consider refinancing its $22.5 trillion debt load. Okay, guys, capital right now is tied up and there could be a liquidity crisis. We've talked about it on this channel before. A liquidity crisis to the proportions that no one has seen to date. I think the writing is on the wall, and the only way we are going to be able to dig ourselves out of this, guys, is to be able to source liquidity instantly through a means where we're capable of doing so. We know XRP is capable of this. Will it be used to save the day? Well, that's an interesting question. All I do know is that there is no other way to be able to source liquidity, at least not to my knowledge. No other way to be able to dig our way out of this, to be able to access that liquidity quicker than using XRP as that liquidity transfer. There's just no other way. I think the writing is on the wall. I think this has been building for so long now. Governments are realizing it. And, all these important bodies, the BIS, the IMF, the US government, governments around the world, many of these central banks are realizing the kind of trouble we're in, especially since so many of these countries' economies are so dependent on the US economy, that they are realizing, okay, this is a problem. We have to face it at some point. We just need to be able to make sure all the regulatory framework is sorted out. We have XRP, we have Ripple waiting on the sidelines. This is going to be our best shot. This essentially is going to be our only shot at trying to mitigate the harms as best as possible. So will people be economically devastated in this next collapse? Absolutely. But I think these governments are realizing it's gotten so out of control that XRP, as a means of sourcing liquidity, is their best shot at trying to mitigate the damage as best as possible. I also saw this on Twitter from XRP Ferguson, that's at TFergTrades on Twitter, sent me to this tweet here from Backup Bradley. And it's a Forbes article just regarding the FOMO in the market. And crypto FOMO is about to reach epic proportions. So kind of along the same lines, talking about the trends, talking about Bitcoin and the movement of the market. And I think this all ties together. I think if there is a serious financial crisis, the crypto FOMO that will occur in the near future will make 2017 crypto FOMO look like child's play. And I'm not kidding. So part of the things they talk about in this article essentially have to do with the fact that, firstly, Facebook's Libra will give crypto access to 2.4 billion customers overnight. So if that comes to pass as it is planned to do in 2020, we have now officially given the mainstream an outlet for crypto, getting them to understand crypto with ease and getting them comfortable with the idea of cryptocurrency through Facebook. These people are already comfortable with Facebook, so now access to cryptocurrencies will be a lot easier. Secondarily, Fidelity, as we know, next week Bakkt is officially going live. Billions could flow in from Fidelity and Bakkt's upcoming launch. So of course the institutional money coming in next week, guys, September 23rd, I think it is. And not only that, people who currently have their money in gold could transfer it over to cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. So this is some of the FOMO that they're talking about from this article. I think that this looming financial crisis, though, could really be that catalyst to really ramp that FOMO up to epic proportions. And realistically, guys, there is only one cryptocurrency that will be able to dig the world out of this mess, namely the one that was created to source liquidity on demand, XRP. I think the powers that be are tending to prop this problem up as much as they can, as long as they can, hold it back until those regulations come into place, because then once they do, XRP usage will be regulated around the world, and then they can be like, all right, let's let it go. Markets will crash, floodgates will open, people will panic, but at least XRP will be there to the rescue. Anyways, guys, that's just my opinion, but I want to hear what you guys think. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Like the video if you like the content I'm providing. I always love hearing your comments. See you in the next one, guys.